My health collapsed, literally, not quite literally the day, but within a week or two of stopping. I think speaks to the pressure that I think all entrepreneurs and founders and early teams and exec teams, and I think many people listening to this probably would nod along of knowing about it. My health still hasn't recovered. That's 8 years ago now. I've found ways of managing, I've found ways of improving it, and I hope one day it will sort of fully recover.
Welcome back to the New F Word podcast, where we talk finances in business. I'm your host, Colin Hewitt, founder and CEO at Float. We're so glad to be back for season 3. And this season, we've got some great guests that are going to bring a ton of value. We'll be diving further into how fractional CFOs add value, what financial clarity actually looks like, and what systems and apps are leading the way. New guests, sharper conversations, let's get into it. Hey, welcome back to the New F Word. Today I'm speaking with Michael Wood, a true pioneer in accounting technology, who's built his second major software company after co-founding Receipt Bank, which many of you will know evolved into Dext, and transformed how we handle data capture in accounting software. We'll explore Michael's journey from startup to scale up to successful exit and what he's doing now in applying those hard-won lessons to his new venture, Translucent. With Translucent, Michael is tackling one of the most persistent challenges that force businesses to migrate to larger mid-market or enterprise ERPs, spending hundreds of thousands often, and he wants to change this, helping multi-entity businesses to scale using platforms they love like QuickBooks and Xero. In this conversation, we explore both the business and personal sides of his entrepreneurial journey. Michael opens up about the toll of his first company and that took on his health and the importance of recovery before starting again. We also dig into the specific market gaps Translucent is addressing, from consolidated reporting to solving the surprising impact of duplicate accounts payable. What I appreciate about Michael's approach is how he's building solutions based on deeply understanding client needs rather than following industry trends, a perspective that comes from being a second-time founder with the luxury of experience. If you've not come across Translucent, I highly recommend checking this out. Backstory. I have a feeling this is very much the way the market is headed. So let's get into it. Michael, it's great to have you on the show. Welcome.
Thank you. Delighted to be here.
Well, look, we've known each other for well over a decade, I imagine. I think I met you originally. You came up to our office when I was running an agency, and you were talking to us about Receipt Bank, which is this company that you just bought, and you were up meeting free agents. I don't know if you remember that, but I remember you coming in, and I don't even know why we were meeting. Maybe we started working on Float
You had started on Float, so you were effectively add-on number one for free agent.
Yes.
Add-on, this term not even used nowadays. App number one on top of free agent.
Yes.
And I guess we were in the Northern Hemisphere app number one on top of Xero. We definitely weren't app number one globally, but I'm trying to think if there's anyone else in the Northern Hemisphere that was before us. I can't think of anyone.
Yeah, so it was early days, and I think it'd be great just for people who don't know you, just to hear about that journey. I don't want to spend the whole time on it because I know we could do, but it'd be great to get this kind of whistle-stop tour of Receipt Bank and how it became Dext, and as it's known now.
Sure, happy to. So as often in these things, there's quite a bit of serendipity along the way. And it all starts with, I was running basically my own personal service company. So having a limited company in the UK for my fractional CMO, Chief Marketing Officer work. Of course, the term fractional wasn't so much then. It's just, but that's effectively what I was. And I was using MYOB, which was marketing itself in the UK around circa 2006, 2007, as the easiest to use, most user-friendly accounting software in the market. And so I adopted it, got to the year end, handed over the file to my accountant, and she actually very pleasantly, but she did say to me, "Oh, Michael, normally for year end we charge £2,000 a year, but you've made such a mess of your accounts, we're going to have to charge you £3,000." So that was my sort of first lesson in trying to sort of self-drive my accounts and how I should never be allowed to do that. And just for sort of background, obviously, I'm not an accountant or anything like that. But she also said, look, why don't you try this? So this is 2007. She said, why don't you try this? And she put me onto Cashflow, Cashflow spelt with a K, which was the first UK cloud accounting product. And at the time, that's sort of 2007 to 2010, there was more than this, but the three leading players in the UK were Cashflow and Free Agent and a New Zealand entrant called Xero. And those were the three sort of cloud accounting participants. And so from 2007 to 2010, I had 3 years of using cloud accounting. So one of the very first businesses to be a cloud accounting client around the world. And that was a huge bit of serendipity. So I remember 2010, I had this experience, and part of the experience for me was, all these receipts and invoices, it used to be really obvious what to do with them because my accountant had the accounting file. So of course I've got to go in with the Tesco carrier bag or the shoebox or whatever. But now that we have a single ledger in the cloud, it's ambiguous as to whose responsibility this data entry is, and it ends up being mine. And I don't think that is how I or most clients will want it to be. And so that was the genesis of Receipt Bank. And it was Receipt Bank from 2010 to, I don't know, about 2019, 2020. It was rebranded as Dext. And so we were the number one add-on or app on Xero around the world, doing for those that don't know, scanning the receipts, scanning the invoices, and getting them into the accounting software. So that was the background.
And, it was kind of impressive to see the rise of, I remember going to Australia and seeing, just spending a bit of time in the office there when we sort of landed in Australia, and just being really impressed that it was a machine in terms of sales organization. And when you went to events, there were 50, it felt like 100, people in orange t-shirts walking around. And then the pre-parties, and, you guys just really nailed that sort of acquisition channel and owned it in a way that we all kind of aspired to. And it was impressive to watch.
Thank you.
I imagine it must have been exciting to be on that sort of rocket ship in a way.
It was exciting, but it's not really those bits that I remember. The bits I remember were almost the more dicey bits. So I think many people listening or watching to this will have empathy with this story, but it was, we started Receipt Bank in 2010. It was August 2010. We were able to accept payments by 2011, because of course this is pre-Stripe, so you had to apply for merchant accounts, etc. And I think it was 2012 where I had a tip-off about the Xero Roadshow that was happening in Australia, and the number of accounting firms that were present at this. And the numbers were, forget a single magnitude, there's several orders of magnitude bigger attending that than anything that was happening in the UK. Accountex didn't happen then in the UK. XeroCon in the UK was a fraction of the size of a single date of, the Sydney Roadshow. And I remember the board meeting at Receipt Bank at the time and saying, we need to open in Australia. And that didn't get a particularly positive response. And I understood why I didn't get a particularly positive response, because our monthly revenue at the time was £3,000. So we had monthly revenue of £3,000, and in comes the youngest member of the board by about 10 to 15 years saying, oh, the thing we all need to do is to open an entity in Australia on the other side of the world. And that's where that would be a smart thing to do. And of course, everyone else was like, what are you talking about? Surely we need to conquer, or some other phrase, the UK first before we think about Australia. And that was And my argument was like, no, this cloud game is different. You've got to go to where the game is being played, and it happened to be Australia. But if Argentina was where cloud accounting was at its hottest, I would have made the argument for Argentina. So I do appreciate the compliment of the machine that Receipt Bank became and is. But the bits I remember, those sort of pretty dicey decisions of like, this feels like the right thing to do. And there were many others. I remember we were sort of very early with an iPhone app to take a photo of receipts. And, that was one of the first things we brought to cloud accounting, the idea of take a photo with your smartphone. And, that goes straight into Xero. That was, again, a controversial thing to invest in at a time when BlackBerry was dominant. The iPhone, the App Store was brand new. It wasn't the behemoth and the feature of everyday lives that it is now. That it is now. It wasn't that then. So there was a sort of series of decisions sort of in my head that were sort of, I look back and think, oof, those were interesting to go through. And that facilitated the machine.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I'm sure there's hundreds of stories we could get into, but I want to skip forward a little bit to, there's a time when, I would have picked up the phone to you and, you would have given us, we would have talked through some of the things we were facing at Flow. And then after the sale, I think, kind of like, where's Michael gone? He sort of disappeared for a bit. And so, tell us about that. You sold and then you took some time off. Was that, love to hear a bit about that.
Yeah, it's actually not that happy a story. So what happened was, it was in 2017 and an acquisition. Sorry, we were in the middle of the Series B process, and that was the first time there was going to be the opportunity of a secondary sale of shares, i.e. some, the opportunity to actually make some money. Having built this business for 7 years, but that 7 years, as much as from the outside looked like a success. I as an individual didn't own a car, didn't own a house, had credit card debts, all these things. So as much as one ostensibly could say, oh, there's Michael, he's, got this high personal balance sheet or asset value, or can't think of the right phrase. Actually, it didn't feel like that at all. And so we had the Series B, and there was going to be a chance of some serious secondary that would enable me to buy a house for the first time in my life. And that was exciting. And we're going through that process. And suddenly an acquisition offer was made for the whole company. And it was a very odd moment to live through, because I went, the phone call was made to me, let's say sort of 5 o'clock in the afternoon. So saying, oh, Michael, verbally, we'd like to buy the company for X. And okay, so I've communicated with Alexis, my co-founder, communicated with the board, this has happened, went to bed and woke up and realized I was exhausted. And it was that thing of, I was 100% happy, that 24 hours before, I was 100% happy to proceed with a Series B, Series C, keep building. But the fact that someone had phoned me and sort of said, actually, this pressure, this conveyor belt, it can stop, made me realize how emotionally tired I was. And so actually I went back to the board, said, look, whether we accept the acquisition offer or accept the Series B, I don't mind, but I can't be part of the pitch for the Series B, because I realize I need to stop. And so we did do the Series B rather than the acquisition. And I worked till, the next 6 months, to sort of slowly offboard things and stopped at Christmas. But then my health collapsed. That literally, not quite literally the day, but within a week or two of stopping. So that, I think, speaks to the pressure that I think all entrepreneurs and founders and early teams and exec teams, and I think many people listening to this probably would nod along of knowing about it. It was, and my health still hasn't recovered. That's 8 years ago now. I've found ways of managing, I've found ways of improving it. And I hope one day it will sort of fully recover. but there's obviously something about the stress of the journey that absolutely took a toll. So I would love to say in those years away, I was on safari, or I was, learning to surf, or, went back to uni and, studied PPE or something like that. But that really isn't the truth. There was quite a lot of visiting doctors, and, it wasn't all bad, but, I wasn't, completely sort of bedbound or anything. But, it wasn't sort of fun and games.
Yeah. Wow. So, well, thanks for sharing. I didn't realize it was that serious. And, I think I've heard other people go through that, kind of a similar thing. Is the pressure and the exhaustion is real.
It is brutal. And it is, I think what founders bring and founding teams often bring is energy more than anything. Obviously direction as well, but energy is such a big part of it. So, and it's the emotional energy that's the brutal part. Physical energy is quite easy to manufacture, but the emotional energy is harder, I think.
So with that context, then the fact that you are again, going again,
like an idiot.
Well, tell us about how did you come? I mean, that's obviously a huge decision coming out of knowing what you know and what it's going to take. And I think you were living in Norway for, was it when you started Translucent? And we'll be good to hear about how that came about and you saw the need.
So in building Receipt Bank, now Dext, we were, I was confused, we were 8 or 9. I must actually one day get the correct number, but let's say we were 8. We were 8 entities around the world. So obviously we had companies in the UK, Australia, South Africa, France, America, etc. So we were 8 entities around the world. There was 8 Xeros and 1 QBO, because QBO at the time was in France for our French entity, and Xero was not. So we were this multi-entity business, and this was for 2015. And I saw firsthand the problems of trying to run a multi-entity business, a group business, across multiple copies of, let's say, Xero. And what we did was, obviously we knew that NetSuite was some natural progression, but that wasn't a project that anyone wanted. And in some ways it wasn't software anyone particularly wanted, but it really was the project. And so we spent 2 years putting it off. And that was using a lot of different apps. It was using, different hacks and things like that, and doing what we could. And I was spending a lot of time speaking to other sort of prominent UK startups that are in the same boat now. How did you stay on Xero longer? How did you stay on QBO longer? But after 2 years, in the end, we had to make the move to NetSuite. And again, that was an interesting project to watch. So of course, you're not just changing your accounting software, you have to change all the ecosystem of apps that's around it. You normally have to make some changes within the finance team to have people that have driven NetSuite before, etc. So I became very aware then of what I call the Xero NetSuite gap. And obviously there are mid-market vendors out there, sort of Sage Intacct, Implicit, Accounts IQ, various other people. But I feel the market is now best described as this Xero NetSuite gap. And so we went from Xero to NetSuite. And so ever since then, I've been fascinated at this opportunity. And sometimes different entrepreneurs would come and say, oh, Michael, have you got any good ideas? And I'd be, oh, well, if you want to build a huge company, build for the Xero NetSuite gap. And the reason I was saying that is because the Xero API is so good now, and the QBO API is good, and Penny Lane in France, the API is good, and Exact in the Netherlands, the API is good. It means that there's the ability to build the mid-market functionalities on top of the SMB accounting software. So therefore, you don't need to migrate. You don't need to go through that big project to leave. You don't need to incur the extra costs. And so I'd been aware of this for a long time. And then after several years, my health got a bit better. I thought, you know what? I'm going to solve that. And so that was founding Translucent about 2 years ago. And Translucent is exactly what I've described. It is a number of apps in one, and all the apps are aimed at the same client. that business that's operating a multi-entity setup but doesn't need to go to a NetSuite or something above. So our apps are things like consolidation, intercompany automation, prepayments, deferred revenue, cash management, etc. And so we're launching more and more apps. There's this huge long list we want to build because we think it's really interesting to have many of these apps all on one platform so they all work together, but also sitting on top of the accounting software that does a really good job. There's no need, to move away. So that's what we're building at Translucent.
Brilliant. I love it. And it makes so much sense. And we haven't been through that journey of moving to NetSuite. We've stuck with Xero. But I've heard so many people having like horror stories of just how much it costs. And then when they get there, the cost to maintain a platform like that or a system like that. And that's, like you say, why you have these other ones like iPlicit and Accounts IQ that seem to be growing as well. But like you say, what's the advantage of moving to one of those platforms when you get you get everything you need in Xero if you just have these extra parts that you're building out? So I think
I think the big innovator in this space was a company called Rippling, which many people listening to this will be familiar with. And Rippling created this concept of the compound startup, but for HR software, starting with payroll and onboarding software, etc. And there's various ways of describing what they do. But my favorite way now about thinking about it is actually they reinvented how you should buy mid-market or enterprise software. So if we think of, how did you historically buy mid-market software? It was like going for a Michelin-starred meal. You pay a big price, your £200 per head or whatever it is, and then you get all 12 courses. And you will eat all 12 courses and you will sit there and have all 12 courses. Even if you just wanted something, so you're going to have all 12 courses. And what Rippling realized is, yes, this person may want all 12 courses, but let's give it to them as a buffet so they can just buy the bit they want when they need it. And so our experience of the market is most people do not want to leave Xero. They want to stay, but they have a problem. Now, that problem may be forecasting, it may be intercompany automation, it may be prepayments, it may be consolidated reporting, it may be working at AP dupes across the group. It can be all sorts of different things, but normally they are running this, these multiple Xeros, this multi-entity setup, and they have a burning problem. And what we try to do is to help them with that first problem, obviously if it's an app we have. And then what we find is, I now also could be more efficient there. Or now 3 months later, 6 months, I now have this problem. So what we try to do at Translucent is allow them just to buy the apps or the modules that they need at a very cost-effective price so they can solve the problem they have there and then without having to get bogged down into a project of, I've got to migrate my accounting software, I've got to rip up my ecosystem of other apps and user permissions, etc. that I have, etc., etc. So that's why we think what Rippling did was incredibly innovative, because they basically allowed you to say, well, yes, the business has this need, but that doesn't mean you need to rip up everything else you've got just to now scratch that itch. You can keep everything else in place and solve that problem.
Yeah, makes a lot of sense. And because let me ask you this: if Translucent had been around at the time when you were making that shift from your setup at Receipt Bank, is the product at the stage now where you could
100%.
You could have said, hold on, let's use that?
100%. I think there's 3 great reasons people move to NetSuite. One is IPO is properly on the agenda, and you need NetSuite or a system of that gravitas for credibility. You have a situation where a new CFO comes in and she and her team drive NetSuite. That's how they do. And clearly, if you've hired that person and that's her stack, well, of course, you're going to respect that. You're not going to hire a CFO and then tell her to, no, you've got to do something else. And the third one is an auditor insists on it. They're saying, no, I don't like your current setup. And, so there's really good reasons to use NetSuite. But the number of times you see businesses that might be, a chain of 10 cafes or recruitment agency that started to do some M&A, so is now 4 entities, or a software business that's in three countries throughout the world, a sort of engineering studio and 2 sales offices or whatever it might be. The idea that those businesses need NetSuite or something above is just not correct. And I would also argue that the need to make a full migration to intact or something like that, when not, as I say, normally the situation is just 1 or 2 very easily solvable problems, is also incorrect. So yeah, 100% we would have been users.
Wow. Yeah, I think that's powerful. And I think, even one of the things I've heard from people sort of scaling up is they're moving away because they need more tracking categories or something like that. That's, first of all, I'm not sure why Xero have stuck with only giving 2. And secondly, you guys solve that problem as well, don't you? You can add
6 more.
Multiple.
Yeah. No, so Craig Walker, who's the founding CTO of Xero, is on our board. And I have chatted to him about his issue.
Right.
So, that decision was obviously made a long, long time ago. And you've got to have huge sympathy for the architectural decisions that were made then in sort of 2006, 2007, 2008. They would be the first to admit themselves they weren't anticipating cloud accounting, to evolve in the way that it has evolved. So they made certain trade-offs, certain decisions that I'm sure that the team in there today pull their hair out and wish they could do more. But tracking categories are a great example where, we saw again and again people leaving Xero because they're limited to 2 tracking categories per entity. So we created these things we call data dimensions, the ability to create 6 new effective tracking categories across the group to increase the scalability of the data model. But yeah, our job at Translucent is basically when any group is looking to leave Xero and they think, oh, this is where it falls down, this is where it breaks, this would be a reason to move to a bigger solution. That those situations are all super interesting for us to hear because those are problems we would like to solve.
Yeah. And is also becoming a thing where people, there's a huge legacy issue in the UK of people using something like CH50 desktop, but yet they don't want to migrate to Sage in the cloud because it's not quite there yet. Does this solve a problem for, people actually going, we can get off? Do you have many people coming from legacy platforms like Sage 50 or?
We see a bit. To me, the Sage 50 migration feels like a demographic. I don't know what to call a problem, but a demographic event that's going to happen that hasn't happened yet. My feeling is, like, obviously I'm not privy to Sage's CRM database, but my guess is there'll be 2 major constituents in that database. I think the minority will be people that have built certain things on top of it, and therefore moving is a scary prospect. But I think the larger constituent to that database will be business owners that put it in, 2, 3 plus decades ago. It works for them. And so I think, as they would see it, the siren song of cloud accounting is not seductive. And, they're not interested in moving. Now, when the next generation take over that business or when they sell that business, that's the moment when, a new wave come in and think, well, actually, no, these are the efficiencies that come with cloud, and this is the change that comes. So we do see it, but I don't feel we're anywhere near the crest of that demographic wave, which is when most will move, is my hypothesis.
Yeah. No, makes sense. And obviously, we're talking a lot about Xero, but are you seeing adoption from QuickBooks users as well?
So
are you focused on the UK or?
in France as well. Sorry, I'm sometimes guilty of using Xero as a proxy for SMB accounting software. It shows sort of how much we worked with Xero in the receipt bank days. I often do it. But what do you see, Colin? Because obviously, you've built consolidated forecasting, so you must also be seeing this.
It's been
need.
Yeah, that was something that we were asked about, from, years ago. And I think, interesting, my background is not in finance. My background was running a small business. So, thinking about multi-entity at the time wasn't something I was even aware of until we opened our Australia office. And then all of a sudden I was like, oh, I get it now. We've got an Australia Xero account and a UK Xero account and how we report our own cash flow, which we were using our own product for, it didn't work. So that was the first time we kind of saw the need of it. And I think a lot of the team were just like, we've got such a range of customers from, much smaller businesses, that are not doing that. But then also on the other end, all these companies coming and saying, can you do consolidated cash flow? And we had to say no. And we just thought, well, actually, let's almost treat this as a different product. And, the team were a bit reluctant to kind of go down that route. And I said, look, I think we can dip our... I mean, cash flow is so complicated. Like, just adding another layer, where then you start thinking about things like intercompany transfers, or, it just felt like we're opening the door into this much, like, you'll understand it, like this big world. And so what we decided to do was like a very, very basic consolidation where you run an individual cash flow separately, like you would do with different accounting platforms, and then we just pull in the balance of those and let you view them all on one dashboard together, and let you plot your multiple different scenarios across those. So it's actually it's one of those features where it's just been pulled out of us by the users. But now we're having people coming to us only for that consolidation. They're just like, I heard you did consolidation, and we're here. And it's really, really exciting to see. So yeah, we've got it now, and there's like you say, there's so many other things we want to do in the meantime that it's almost like that's one ticked off. The next one for us is VAT, GST, that we get asked a lot about as well, which is another big beast. But I think...
Sorry, what specifically is VAT or GST?
So yeah, just being able to forecast that into the your payments when they come in. So our forecasting is because it's cash based, it's VAT inclusive. So we didn't want to get into there's other platforms out there that every time you're entering an amount, you're saying like this category has this amount of VAT on it, and a lot of our customers are just like, that's a level of complexity that I don't want to think about. I just know my rent is this on this day of the month, and that's what I want to put out there. So anyway, we've kind of, a lot of people, we focus on short-term forecasting, and most people with VAT issues are doing it. They know what their VAT is going to be next month anyway, because they've just submitted it and they've got another month and 7 days, and sometimes they're only looking that far out. So for us, we sort of felt like it's not a huge problem. But now we're getting into these larger companies. They're wanting to do longer term forecasting, and they need to know their VAT liability because it can be sizable. So that's the next big one off our list. But what about you guys? What's on the roadmap? I know you've listed about 4 products that you've already got out. What are the big things you're eager to tick off?
It's funny as you're talking. Like, I know one of the things the guys are working on just now, and this isn't one of the big things, but it is funny. Like, I don't think everyone will realize it here. So each Xero file has a time zone. And that time zone actually sets the FX rates used.
Right.
And so one of the things I know the guys are working on just now is because it can make translucent look inaccurate, because it's like, well, you've pulled my 4 zeros together, but your number seems to be different than, 03 and 04. And it's like, yeah, because we're operating on a single time zone now, and your 4 zeros are coming from different time zones. So one of the things they're doing is allowing people both to see which time zone each of their zeros are on, but also then to actually to have the ability to say, well, actually, do you really want this? Or would you prefer your Australian zero to be on the same time zone? Doesn't change the currency, the same time zone as your UK zero, because then that way they'll use the same FX rates and things like that. Now, for some people, that's like, I don't really care about that. That's a level of detail more than I need. Whereas other people are very much sort of, no, this is the kind of thing I need. So, as I say, what we're always working on is just this sort of, what problems do we have? The latest one that we've been getting some great feedback about is, I mentioned AP Dupes. It's the first tool in our procurement app. It's a free tool, so anyone can use it. And what it allows you to do is add your zeros or your QBOs to Translucent, and we will show you the AP dupes across the group. And it is amazing how many people have money they can recover. And we've seen, many people have thousands. We've seen people have tens of thousands as a P&L effect, and we've actually seen people have hundreds of thousands as a balance sheet effect. Like different types of business, and obviously we've got businesses of all size, but we're excited about that.
Why does that? I mean, so AP dupes, account payable duplicates. Why do those things exist?
So it's really interesting. I think by far the most common case is some kind of error. So it's been the invoice has been sent once to one entity, and maybe the statement has been sent to a second entity, or a follow-up has been sent to a second entity, or if it wasn't on the supplier side, it was somewhere in the finance team of it's been, one copy of the invoice has been done once. And then sometimes you can just see, it might not be there's 2 copies of the invoice sent. It can literally be, you can see it in the data, it's been obviously processed on a Monday, and then for whatever reason, it's been processed again on a Tuesday. And just it happened to probably be a different bookkeeper who was like, oh, this one should go here, not there. You definitely also do get fraud. There is definitely people deliberately sort of testing a system of, well, I'm going to send this invoice, more than once, and, we'll sort of see what happens. So there's various situations, but the vast majority of groups have AP dupes. And sometimes it can just be, a small amount, a few £100 in a year or something like that. But it is commonly thousands of pounds. And so again, that's the kind of problem we want to be all over of, whether you're running 2 zeros, 20 zeros, or 200 zeros, we want you to be in a situation where you as the CFO, or you as a fractional CFO, effectively feel as though you've got a single system and not this fragmented system. And so AP Dupes was something, as I say, is very new off the ramp, or just the first user's been getting in the last week or so.
That's so cool.
But that's the kind of thing, we're just constantly, what's the next, what problems need to be solved to give the finance teams operating a multi-entity setup comfort, reassurance, efficiency.
And you said 200 zeros. Do you have anybody with 200? I mean, that sounds like a huge amount.
It was interesting. So when I started Translucent, I did some numbers and of estimating what the market size was, and how many people would be out there running 5+ zeros, 10+ zeros, etc. And I got all my numbers wrong by a huge margin. We have very large groups, and the frequency that people are coming to us with, 10 plus, 20 plus. So I thought they would be almost sort of unicorns. So I thought, oh my God, someone's come through the door with 20 zeros. That is not rare at all. And when people come to us as they do every day with groups of 3 or 4 or 6 or 7 or 8 or 9, that's all just a normal day. That's just a normal day at Translucent. Now, those coming through the door with 100 plus, that is more rare. I can't claim they come through the door every day, but they're not super rare.
Right. And what are they doing before they're using Translucent? Like what are they doing? Are they pulling things
really
into Excel or?
So it then gets down to sort of which workflow are you talking about? Are you talking consolidation? Are you talking intercompany? Are you talking AP dupes? Are you talking FP&A? What are you talking? And obviously the vast majority are using Excel in some ways. You see all sorts of interesting problems where some workflows you can see, oh no, I can see you have been managing, but often you see situations where, oh no, this just hasn't been working. So intercompany is a classic example of, if you think of intercompany accounts in the chart of accounts, you would like to think that there is a coherent nomenclature used, naming convention is used that is coherent. The vast majority do not have that. And you see that actually what's happened is probably the business started out as a single entity. And then let's say 5 years ago, a second entity was added. So whoever was, running the finance team or whoever was in charge of the chart of accounts, added something. Then let's say 2 years went by and 2 more entities were added. Someone different was doing it. Or if it's not displaced in time, it might be displaced by geography. So it might be actually one person or one accounting firm has set up the chart of accounts in Australia, whereas another person, another accounting firm has set up the chart of accounts in the UK entity. And so when someone comes in as a CFO, they're then confronted with this data set that's mangled. So you definitely, sitting in the seat of Translucent, you definitely see how some groups, have been managing, and certainly have been managing for some workflows, but you see an awful lot of people that have, to some degree, it hasn't been working.
Wow, you must have a lot of happy, relieved customers, I imagine, when they sort of get the view of what they can do.
Yeah, it's why I talk about sort of reassurance sometimes. Like one of the first apps we actually put out there was just search, the ability just to search across all the zeros and all the transactions at once. It's give the ability for people to see all their data. And it's interesting, a lot of people think of consolidation as a month-end process. Actually, we're working for it to be a much more live process. So you can see what's happening. You can see where things are going wrong. And particularly the multi-entity setup. It is quite rare in a multi-entity setup for just one team in some way to be doing all the bookkeeping. So as soon as the bookkeeping's a bit fragmented, different processes, different people, different preferences, different setups, instantly that's a recipe for things to, begin to go awry. So we're super excited about what we're doing. And to be honest, we're super excited about the ability for, I keep using the term Xero here, but we're super excited the ability of SMB accounting software to get more and more sophisticated and conquer the world. Because there's a really interesting debate one can have now about, okay, is the next generation of accounting software UI-based or API-based? And so for those that don't know what that means, is UI is exactly sort of the accounting software as you log in, you use it personally, and API-based is how two software programs speak to each other. And when you look at what AI agents are going to do in this world, they are going to do a lot of the UI tasks, and they're going to need the APIs. So it's absolutely fascinating about how does that look? How does it work? What will accounting software, what will Xero be in 5 years' time? will Xero still be something that people log into, or will they be making their own AI agents or buying AI agents that, or, how will they be operating it? And no one really has the answer to that. But it's fascinating to think about.
So fascinating. I think my final question is probably going to be, it's really interesting being a second-time founder. And, a lot of people, that's the only people laid back is second-time founders, because they've been through the journey and they've made their mistakes. And they know what they're doing differently. Like, what are you going to do differently, or what are you doing differently with Translucent? How are you approaching it? Obviously the world has changed. We're in the AI world. Are you planning to still scale in the same way? Are you going to ramp up the sales team? Are you going to, build it through that? Like, what are you going to do the same? What are you going to do differently without giving away all your trade secrets?
Second-time founders have lots of advantages because they've done it and seen it, etc. They also have disadvantages. And there's a newsletter I love called Stratechery by a guy called Ben Thompson. And he was writing today about Apple. And he was basically saying, is Tim Cook in a really, really bad place with Apple? Because everything he did from 1997 to, let's say, 2017, that were the right decisions to make, are all now the wrong decisions because of the geopolitical stress between China and America, because of AI, because of these different things. And so Ben Thompson's Stratechery article today was almost sort of saying, is he absolutely the wrong person to lead, because he needs to learn completely new lessons. And I think AI is so fundamental, such a huge shift. I definitely wake up some days thinking I'm really glad I'm a second-time founder, but there's definitely other days I think, oh God, am I the worst person to do this? Because you really don't want a whole lot of old opinions and old biases, because it is just so different. Like, if I tried to build Translucent in the way we built Receipt Bank, we would just straight fail. Like, it would just be a straight fail. But yeah, I think for, AI is just that such huge shift, and I have sympathy for those desktop software executives, how they must have felt in 08 to 10 or 08 to 12 about how do you make that shift, especially if you're, a bit long in the tooth like I am. I'm almost 50 now. And yeah, just, is it better to be a bit naive? Don't know. Don't have a good answer, I'm afraid.
Well, in terms of, what about, are you planning to, hit all the events again? Are you doing it, using different strategy from an acquisition point of view?
Basically, for the last year, what I've been saying to the team internally is reconnaissance. So it's like, let's go to certain events, let's try different things, and that's tried to just acknowledge the fact of, yes, I had a lot of success with different GTM strategies, from 2010 to 20, or, till we only sold Receipt Bank in December, or Dext in December, the last bit of it. So we had a lot of success, but I've got to work out again, do those work now in 2025 and onwards or not? So we've been doing a lot of reconnaissance, and some things have pleasantly surprised, some things have negatively surprised, but we're still learning. We're definitely still learning.
Yeah, I mean, it's certainly one from our end that after we opened our Australia office just before COVID in the beginning of 2020, I think we went out in January. And the plan of that was to be able to do those events and then obviously everything was cancelled. And since then we've really kind of just decided, let's just pull back from events because of the energy required to attend, to prepare. And let's try other things. It's like, what would we do differently? Because we figured that we weren't targeting primarily accountants at that point. We were more targeting CFOs. And yeah, I think it's an interesting world, and but I think people still want to go to events, and maybe what we're thinking is maybe smaller, more targeted gatherings or invitation based kind of parties or get-togethers, that kind of thing. So maybe we'll have to do some float on translucent.
Yeah, up for that. Definitely up for that. Sounds good.
Boat renting. Well, great. In terms of your health, I wish you all the best.
Thank you.
I think hopefully you're able to go at it in a pace that works. And have you got, what strategies are you deploying to try and manage that and to stay to make sure that you don't?
That's part of the reason we started Translucent than a larger than normal team. So it wasn't me doing all the tasks, in the way those first years at Receipt Bank. I'm sure the first years for you Float, where basically you're just doing everything. Everything hits your desk. And definitely I was lucky enough to be in the position this time around to have a bit more of a team around me from the beginning. So, fewer things would hit my desk, which definitely has made a difference. Has definitely made a difference.
Yeah, I think, that's a huge one, this delegation, having a COO or assistant and all the different things you can do. So yeah, letting go of a few things as well, not holding on so tightly. Well, look, Michael, yeah, really exciting. It feels like, I don't know how you do it, but you've managed to land on another big problem space. It feels at just the right time. And, really look forward to seeing Translucent unfolding, and, and hopefully we can do more together there as well. So yeah, great to have you on, and watch this space.
That would be great. Thank you. Thank you very much for having me.
Thank you. Thanks for tuning in to another episode of The New F Word. I hope you enjoyed it. Remember, expert financial advice shouldn't be limited to those with just big budgets. You can access the same level of advice for a fraction of the costs thanks to this fractional revolution. I believe that every growing business needs to know how much a game changer this can be. So if you loved the episode, please consider subscribing to the show. It'll help us keep doing what we're passionate about, and feel free to share this episode with others who might find it useful. Finally, we'd love to hear your thoughts. Feel free to connect with us on LinkedIn. See you in the next one.